welcome to today's I Love Learning podcast. And if you don't know my special guest, you're going to soon learn to meet him because Jim Rowley is on our call today. And if you don't know Jim, he is a dear friend, a mentor, and a former colleague of mine that was very instrumental in where I am today. And we talk about every week we've had somebody on and they say, who was your biggest influence in your career, in your life? And I would say for me, it was Jim. So I'm so happy to have Jim on today. And I'm going to have Jim because I would spend the whole 20 minutes talking about all the great things that Jim is and has done for the world and the community of Dayton and beyond. But you know what? We don't have that much time. So I'm going to have Jim introduce himself and tell everyone that's listening and my entire team and the entire community that's listening what he's passionate about. Jim, take it.
Gina, first of all, it's so good to see you.
You too.
We had such a good time and a productive time working together at the University of Dayton. And for all of those of you that worked with Gina, just to wind the clock back in time before I talk about myself. Gina was back when she was working for me many years ago. She was interested in technology, but she didn't know what direction to go. And one of her ideas was to do these videos of celebrities' homes to do problem-based learning crib tours.
Yes, yes, I do. Yes.
So we were going to develop the software to do that.
Yeah.
And
whose crib are we going to go see?
That was it. But anyway, somehow, some way, you ended up with a little encouragement going to Indiana and getting your PhD. And now look at you, your own podcast, your own company. So what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about teaching and learning on a professional level. Now, on a personal level, that's a whole other thing. You can talk about outdoors and fishing and hiking.
And your island. So everyone, Jim owns an island. You used to go. You don't anymore. What?
Actually, three. Actually, there's three.
Of course you do. Of course you own 3 islands. Yeah.
It's small, so don't get too excited. But, all of those things are more enjoyable, of course, when they're enjoyed with dear friends and family, my wife, Barb, my kids, my grandchildren. But on a professional level, I continue to be excited about teaching and about learning. And of course, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, most definitely. And Jim's very entrepreneurial, and I got like a lot of inspiration from Jim. He's being very modest, but talk about an innovator. Jim is very innovative, and so it's always interesting to me to ask and talk with Jim about what inspires him or what he feels is inspirational about learning.
Yeah, for me, it's always back to that old formula of motivation equals value plus opportunity for success. And so what I tend to get excited about are things that are important to me. And then after I decide, hey, this is really something I could be passionate about, I ask myself a second question. Do I have a chance of being successful at that? And if the answer to that is yes, then I'm inspired to kind of move forward. And the things that I valued and pursued across my career obviously have changed, but at one time, and it still is, problem-based learning, project-based learning, today personalized learning. But more lately, I'm really interested in things like mindfulness and compassion, and I'm doing a lot of training in those areas.
That's outstanding. So in terms of mindfulness and compassion, what specific interest do you have in that? Like, I just wrote an article about the inspiration of having a mind of a champion and what that looks like. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, of course, I work with teachers and school administrators a lot. And as you would imagine, just like people who are in industry and have a lot of responsibilities, they're under a lot of stress, and a lot of it is self-created. The mind is it's a wonderful thing. It can create a whole world of our own and manifest things into our lives, but it also has a way of constantly talking to us in the background. And we often listen to that and get distracted. So learning how to be aware of your thinking, how to focus, how to calm the mind, how to clearly think about what your intentions are. All of that's important. And that's led me really to now I'm very concerned about some things in our world today. As an educator, I worry a lot about the fact that we seem to have lost a capacity for civil discourse. We don't seem to be able to talk to one another about differing points of view. So I'm interested in nonviolent communication and how we can hopefully return sometime to a place where you can be passionate about an idea, but also understand that claims need reasons, that facts are important. So anyway, I'm sorry if that was a little all over the map, but
No,
yeah,
it's so important. I mean, that's the whole core of why learning's important, right? Is to see and understand and be open to other perspectives. So we have a more open way of communicating. And I remember back when you and I were going around to all the different schools in the Ohio, Dayton area and talk about different perspectives. And so this is something that was really foundational to me in terms of engaging learners into a learning experience. One of the things we usually talk about on our podcast is how do you engage people into learning, especially when they're not interested or maybe they don't have the interest in that topic. And one thing that we did, Jim, is we went, and do you remember the base jumping gentleman that we video conferenced into that room? So what Jim did, I mean, talk about innovative. This is like, y'all, this is like when there wasn't video conferencing. Jim's like, hey, Gina, we're going to do this thing and we're going to set up a camera. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, right. And he's like, no, we are. And we are going to call in this base jumper. Where was he from? He was like in I don't even remember now.
Well, it was amazing because he was in California and he literally had just got off a base jump. So, you know, for a little context, we were teaching teachers about problem-based learning, and we did it by actually having a symposium at the university and the law school where teams of teachers debated whether base jumping should be outlawed in the national parks. And what better resource to bring in than bring in somebody who actually does it, and who, of course, was very upset that his sport was going to be denied.
Right. And I think the big core of this is bringing in diverse perspectives and kind of bringing that in, right? So when you think about how do you engage people in that conversation to be open to this idea of having these communication channels among this time in history that we're in?
Well, I mean, it all begins by trying to make your best judgment about what groups of kids or groups of adults. I do a lot of adult work, obviously, but trying to find out your best guess about what would really excite them or interest them. What would be intriguing to them? What would be mysterious? What would inspire some awe or wonder? And it's back to that whole notion that at some point you have to hook them. And sometimes you miss, sometimes you make the wrong guess, but if you talk to them and ask them, they'll usually tell you. You can see the excitement kind of fire up in their eyes. And then you can move forward in trying to bring them in. And the more authentic it is, the better.
That just leads in. What does it mean? Say it. What does authentic learning mean to Jim Rowley? In Jim Rowley's words, we're going to make T-shirts. You remember the turkey T-shirt?
The simplest thing, right? Okay, really. You know, but seriously, authenticity is just like it's real world, and you can think of it on a continuum, right? I mean, I can do the simulation that we did with the base jumping. It was simulated, but it was pretty authentic because we involved the resources that were real in the world and brought them in. And remember that it was an article published in Base Jumping Magazine.
I remember
about our project. So whenever we're teaching children and we want to engage them, if we can simulate the work that adults are doing in the real world, using the tools and the resources, the technologies that they use to solve their problems, whether it's in a laboratory or in a business enterprise, if we can get them doing that work, then we're moving them closer and closer to a really authentic learning experience.
Exactly. Like you have to have some alignment, right, between what
Yeah,
they're going to be doing in life. Otherwise, why does it matter in the first place?
yeah.
It's
You know,
definitely, I think, important. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about a time when maybe something that you did, you've had so much experience and so many different things that we could spend 2 hours talking about it. But if you were to like tell the audience, maybe there was a time that you learned something that left an impact on you, or maybe you had to go out and you left an impact on others. Can you share an experience like that, or something that you were involved in that really left an impact?
well, for sure. I mean, when you teach for 52 years in one capacity or the other, there's a few
Yeah,
stories.
maybe a couple.
There's a couple of stories in there, but I guess one of them that really, and there are so many, but one that
Mm-hmm.
stands out is many years ago, back in the dark ages, or
Mm-hmm.
in the mid 1980s, I had the opportunity to be involved in the Teacher in Space program, and I
Mm-hmm.
was a semifinalist. And it was a very powerful learning experience in many ways, especially the way, of course, that it ended. But the lesson that I learned there that I've tried to carry forward is that the Challenger didn't explode. It did explode, of course, because of a technical problem.
Mm-hmm.
The O-rings failed. But the reality is that they failed because the Challenger should never have been launched that day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Mm-hmm.
because of a breakdown in communication, where the people that were making the decision to go forward and launch weren't listening to the people who were the closest to the problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't care where you work, if you're a leader in any industry or in a school, it's just so important to pay attention to what people who are working with the client are telling you, the people that are working with the product. Those engineers at Morton Thiokol, they
Mm-hmm.
got up every morning and went to bed every night thinking about O-rings, little, and
Mm-hmm.
yet they were ignored for let's just maybe a political reason. So that was a powerful lesson I've taken away, and I try to
Mm-hmm.
pass it on, whenever
Yeah.
I can. Yeah.
Definitely. I remember sitting in Jim's office. I told him this before we went live. It was one of my first memories of being with Jim, was sitting in his office, and he pointed up to a picture of him and Chris. It was from the Challenger, and he talked about how he was part of the space program, and really what left an impact on me, Jim talking about this experience and of inspiring people, is how he went out after this horrific accident and spoke to teachers around the country, right, and try to instill inspiration in something that was broken, and to inspire people to be still wanting to be astronauts and to be in science and
Yeah.
technology. And I think for me as a woman entrepreneur, that really inspired me. So thank you for doing that. That was amazing.
Yeah, well, it was an honor, really, and a privilege. I even got to go to England and speak to all the Department of Defense schools, and so yeah, it was
Pretty
a
big
really
deal.
it was a, and the thing about it is, Gina, all of us in life, and speaking about us and how we learn, oftentimes some of our biggest steps forward is when we break free from a pattern of thinking or a pattern of behavior. And I loved being a high school teacher, and I had done it for 20 years, but I knew also that there was something inside of me that wanted to learn more and take on something new. And I was thinking about moving on to university teaching. And I kept putting that decision off.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, the personal event was the loss of the Challenger.
Mm-hmm.
For someone else, it might be the loss of a parent or a personal illness or an economic, disappointment in one's own bit. Whatever it is, there's something that triggers you to realize there are other things to learn and other
Mm-hmm.
places to grow. So
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we just have to be aware that those things and events in our lives shouldn't be the end, right? They should be the inspiration to start something anew, and to challenge yourself and see the fire that's within you to start something anew. And so that's amazing. And I think what we find a lot, and we talk to a lot of people all around, that, they're at these points in their lives where maybe there's an obstacle or a hurdle or something that they haven't been able to get over. Can you maybe talk about a time where either you had to overcome something and you came out on the other side feeling completely anew, or maybe there was someone that you helped overcome a hurdle that now had a more inspiration for learning, that you could provide that example to help somebody that's listening?
Yeah. One of the things about teaching that is just the nature of the business, and I kind of think it contributes to the nobility of the work, is that teachers all over this world, whether they're in a corporate training environment or they're in a elementary classroom, oftentimes you work so hard as a teacher, and once in a while you see concrete evidence of the ideas that you share really taking hold and people moving forward and clearing a hurdle. But a lot of times you never hear from them. And yet they're out there, and you have to have the faith. Sometimes they'll contact you and thank you. And that's a wonderful thing. So I'll speak more to a personal hurdle. And that was just, and this is nothing special. I just joined the Cancer Club a few years ago. And, that's an interesting thing to go through in terms of how you come out of that with a new perspective. In fact, a lot of my interest in compassion came from that reality of encountering one physician who interacted with my wife, Barb, and I in a way that just left us feeling hopeless, and interacting with another physician who, with the same facts, was able to talk to us in a way that was hopeful, compassionate. And I left that thinking, there has to be a way. We are all born with the capacity to be compassionate, but sometimes it's dormant, and we have to find ways to cultivate it and know that it actually contributes not only to the well-being of others, but to one's own sense of peace and in harmony with the world.
Jim, what you just described is having a mind of a champion. I know that you're a champion, but definitely that describes having a mind of a champion. And really, having a mind of a champion is obviously recognizing that hurdle, but then being able to overcome it with positivity. So that's really outstanding, and obviously an inspiration. So
yeah, well, life is full of hurdles. You got to find a way around or through, right? Grit, persistence, determination. There's always a way around,
Yeah. And so with that, if there's someone that's listening that has lost their passion, and they're listening today and they've lost their passion to learn, what advice or what would you say to that person with this understanding that you're coming from, of this perspective of having a compassionate voice?
Well, first, number one, thinking back now to my teacher in space experience, and I had these little cards that I carried with me and passed out in schools. And on one side was the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and on the other side was a note from me that just basically said, "Keep your dreams." And I look back and I think it was, well, maybe that was a little silly, but the reality is that there's so much power in the human mind and the human spirit that we do have the capacity to manifest into this world what we want. And we all have dreams and hopes, I hope, and that we haven't lost those. And that if you could just keep thinking about it, and if it's really that important to you, start asking there's so much about asking questions. And then if you can't find the answer, find somebody who can answer it. And if you keep doing that, all of a sudden, one day, this thing will show up in your life. That's a problem.
That's outstanding. Jim, if somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing, who you are, where they can connect with you, what information can you provide so that they can look you up and maybe reach out?
Well, they can reach me at Rowley, Rowley, Rowley1 at Dayton, as in the University of Dayton, where I taught for 22 years. Go Flyers.
Go Flyers.
udayton.edu. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Jim. Is there anything else you'd like to add today for the learners that are listening?
No, just to thank you, Gina, for number
Mhm.
one, just the opportunity to reconnect with you. It's been too long. We'll have to have another longer phone conversation to find out all the wonderful things that you and your company are doing. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
you bet. You
Yeah.
bet. And thanks for being an inspiration to so many people, myself included, and those people who are out that you've touched their lives that you never know they're out there. So thank you, Jim, and thanks for being on with me today.
Thank you, Gina. Take care.